Welcome in, everybody. Welcome to Behind the Forecast, Beyond the Forecast.
Beyond the Forecast.
It's still a new show. We're getting used to this.
That's okay. You're not as tired as I was when I was in New Zealand, and that's where we're going to start this episode with, because we're going to take a look at the Rocket Lab facilities behind the scenes, inside where they build the Electron and the Electron rocket and put it all together.
So just for reference of anyone who doesn't know Rocket Lab,
Right.
And how and why Campton Rhodes is connected to something in New Zealand?
Yes, because they launched their Electron rocket at Wallops Flight Facility. So at the Mid-Atlantic Regional Spaceport, Wallops Island, that's where they have launched their rocket several times. Their headquarters is New Zealand. That's where they've launched most of their vehicles. But we have a spot for them here. Why? Because when you launch from different parts of the world, you can take advantage of what trajectory you're going to orbit the Earth in. So if you want to do an orbit from pole to pole, well, you want to be in New Zealand. If you want to do an orbit that's not pole to pole, well, then you want to maybe do that from Wallops.
Or the Northern Hemisphere, yeah.
And then less fuel, because otherwise you have to use more fuel to get into the right orbit. So,
right, position, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe that's another topic of discussion, too. We could talk about orbital mechanics and
Yes.
why things orbit other things.
Let's get on our orbital
but
books.
yeah, so you were you were on a nice long vacation in the Southern Hemisphere, got to go to New Zealand, check out the beautiful area that is, and you also said, you know what, while I'm there, we got to check out
Rocket Lab, yes.
Yeah, so take us through some of the stuff you got
Yeah,
here.
so this is their main lobby here, and I want to give everyone a little preface. When I was doing this video, this is 2 o'clock in the afternoon after I've been awake for more than 26 hours, nonstop after flying. So I was very tired.
Prefacing
So-
the video quality is
Yes,
the best?
the video
is that what's
quality,
going on?
and I tried to do the best I could because I was a little loopy, but we're seeing an Electron rocket right there. That was the first one that they recovered. Not the first one launched, but the first one that they recovered. And then this silver thing right here, that's called the Humanity Star. That was launched on one of the earlier Electron launches that they launched from New Zealand. This was launched actually on January 20th, 2018. It's an artificial satellite that was in polar orbit for a couple of months. You could actually see it from the ground with the unaided eye. So again, their timeline right here in their lobby, that's their main control area where rockets are launched, where you can see those people that are standing inside
Look at
there.
the monitors over there.
Yeah.
You're saying, is that
It's
kind of
unbelievable.
like the little control room that you're saying? Like,
Yes.
when we go back and said, Houston, checking
yeah,
in, whatever,
exactly.
Houston to launch, all that kind of stuff.
That's where they're doing it, right there.
You know what I mean? And I think we have this image in our head of some of the space travel from the 60s and the early 70s here in the U.S. And
Yeah.
that was so much of recycled military equipment and all this stuff. And of course, Hollywood makes all the movies and stuff about it. So we have the kind of image in our head of what that was like. It's not like that anymore. You know what I mean? It is so advanced and it's so cool.
Yeah, and the things that we're going to show here coming up in a few minutes, because this is just kind of the more exterior side of what they have going on there. We're going to take a look at some of the things inside going on. You have to remember now, we're not just on a fun tour. We're looking at a lot of things that are their own. We're not going to look at their secrets, but a lot of things in this facility are their secrets and their technology. So there's a lot of things I couldn't show and
Of course,
record.
yeah, that makes sense.
And then there's also military secrets too when it comes to each kind of country having their own technology. So we're going to look at a lot of stuff that we haven't seen before, and I'll describe some things that I couldn't record, but I'll still kind of give us a little insight. It's really cool.
I mean, it's just really fascinating,
It's
too.
fascinating stuff.
Yeah, we're not
and
the
this is
only-
all about the Electron rocket. We're going to then also talk about the big one that's going to launch from Wallops here later this year. That'll be the Neutron. And we'll get
Neutron
into all the
rocket.
sizes here in
all
a
right,
little bit.
so we're going to take a quick little break here. I'm still working out the kinks of the software that we're operating, so we're going to reset and we're going to launch up some new videos that you have here.
Yeah.
So just kind of stick with us here for a little bit.
So this is...
All right, welcome back in. Jeff, you've got some more goodies to show us, don't you, about Rocket Lab?
Yes, we're back to Auckland, New Zealand, to where they're putting together these Electron rockets. It's a really huge facility. There's a lot of people that work there, a lot of younger people that work there. People that were touring me around, Morgan was her name, she was mentioning that the average age is around mid to upper 20s for the people that work there. So it's a younger group of people that are these engineers that are getting their hands dirty.
Love it.
Again, not
Love
U.S.
it.
This is something that's for New Zealand, but we do have other facilities. They have other spots around the globe, some in California, some here in Virginia as well.
Yeah,
where
and the
people
Wallops
work.
Island facility, of course, is where they launch some of their stuff here. So what
Let's
are
check
we looking
this
at
one
here?
out.
Let's check this one out, because this is kind of more in the
Okay.
weeds, right?
Yeah, so now we're looking at the overview. I can only show you this right side where we have the film here, but the right side of the facility, in each kind of room is a different spot for each part of the rocket. So engines are constructed in one area.
Makes sense.
Reaction wheels, the thing that kind of controls the rocket, so it kind of keeps its position so it doesn't just freely spin.
Yeah.
Those are done in one area. And then in the middle of the facility, these are the shells of the Electron rockets. Look at all of these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They just went all the way back. The one right here that I'm pointing at, that's the one that's actually going to come to Virginia, part of the HASTE launch. You can see the writing there on the left side of it. So this is an Electron rocket, and this is coming here to the United States, to Virginia, to launch from Wallops.
My question was, each one of those an Electron rocket,
Yes.
or is it connected? Those were the pieces. Because I was going to say,
each black tube was a
Kinda
different rocket.
a little smaller than I imagined.
Yes, the
Right?
Electron rocket isn't huge.
Yeah.
It's not a huge machine.
This ain't a shuttle launch we're doing. This ain't a,
No, it's smaller payloads going into
Of
orbit.
course,
We
of
don't
course.
need the big boy to
Yeah.
send a smaller
Yeah.
payload to orbit.
I mean, you're looking at some of these stands here that are holding things. Like I
Yep.
think that was what looked like maybe the cap of one of the rockets.
The fairing, the
If
top
you-
fairing.
The
So
top
the
fairing.
will release, and then the sensitive satellite will be exposed. You can't do that when you're flying through the atmosphere. The satellite would be destroyed.
So these satellites give us a reference on size of some of the things because that's the payload that these rockets are launching. We talk
Yes.
about satellites that are orbiting the Earth.
Yep.
I mean,
They can
I'm
be
sure they used to be big, but they can be any size.
They can be any size. They can be for any customer that
Sure.
wants to launch on there. So it's smaller payloads, but you can see what they have here. They have a whole system. Look at all the shells. Now that black shell.
Oh, I see where it says haste there.
Yeah, HASTE
on
right
the
there.
left. Yep.
That black shell, Steve, is about the size, maybe 3 or 4 quarters thick.
That's it.
That's how thick the shell is, and then inside is the fuel tank, of course. But in
It's just
terms of the
mind-boggling.
body,
It's
of it,
just like I don't know. It's just so fascinating. You think
Yeah.
about the stuff. So what is he kind of working on in here?
machining
you know?
right here. So an employee is kind of machining some parts, getting them all cleaned up. So for future,
But right
future
there,
assembly.
right there, straight ahead on the right
fairing.
side. That's the fairing.
Yep,
that's
that's
kind of
fairing
the
on the right
cap of
side.
the rocket. Yeah.
Yep,
Okay.
that's
Cool.
fairing on the right side. There used
And
to be a
that
lot more, but they have rockets going out, so they don't have that many sitting in there.
that
at
looks
the
like
time.
something that could fit in the back of someone's Tacoma. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? In a pickup
Yeah.
truck. Like that's not that
Exactly.
big. You know what I mean?
No.
There's like something you can, so some of the satellite sizes depending on the payload. That's
Yeah.
some really fascinating stuff.
They put together all their engines. I can't show video of that, of course, but all their engines they're putting together. They're building there. There's teams assembling them. It was a phenomenal place. You can see just the overview again. They really have a cool operation, and that's just for the Electron. What comes next, their next big mission is the Neutron rocket, and that's also being part of the Wallops new launch pad that they're building at Launch Complex
Gotcha.
3. So we have
Gotcha.
an image of that they shared with us, and that
Which is, you're saying they're still building it, so it's not complete yet.
under construction.
Under construction
Yep.
here. So this is in the Max computer.
Yes.
You want to load up right now.
Yep.
So let's take a peek. Let's take a peek at this. So this is now
Yes.
back home here on the Eastern Shore.
Yep,
This
and
right here on the Eastern Shore, this
this
is
is-
Wallops Island right here. So,
Yep,
so guide us
Mid-Atlantic
through what we're
Regional
looking at right now.
Spaceport. Yes. So the black circular thing, and go ahead and advance it once so it zooms in. The black circular thing that we're seeing kind of right there in the middle bottom part of the screen, that's the launch pad. There's equipment that needs to go around it to support the new. Oh, nice. There you go. Look at
I
that.
I got you.
Put
We're
yours
right.
on there.
We're right.
So that there needs to be more equipment that needs to go into that. So it's not complete yet. There's also the water tower that they built as well. The water tower that's farther back, the white one that has a scaffolding around it, that's used for the Antares launches. So basically you have water flood down as the rocket is launching, and it kind of helps the sound as it attenuates from the base of pad, so you don't get these massive shock waves going out. You basically have something that is more contained and controlled. You don't want that sound going everywhere. So that's a look at Launch Complex 3. Hopefully we'll be able to get out there and preview it before they do their first launch, maybe later this year. It's really looking good from the picture.
Schedule looks like from the launch moving forward. You're saying later this year there could be some stuff that we could be on the lookout for.
Yeah, so that's going to be the Neutron rocket that'll launch from there. Electron launches, and you can't really see it in this picture, but it launches from the other side of that black water tower. Gotcha. There's another pad there. So they don't use the same pad. They use their own pads.
Yeah, but this is just exciting stuff that is happening right here in our backyard. And we'll be able to... My mic has been off. We'll be able to kind of pinpoint that stuff and be able to show it to you guys here at home. You know what I mean? This is really cool
This
stuff.
is gonna be amazing.
And a lot of times too, these launches, Jeff, you do such a great job showing it on air. So sometimes the launches match up with our newscasts, and we could see it on our tower cams, and you could see the launches on the horizon.
Usually
here.
the Cape Canaveral ones, we can see the big ones from down there.
And
from
these ones, though,
SpaceX or
they're
other
these ones that
companies.
are real quick. Are these kind of like the NASA ones that are just so fast, that so small? It's like
the sounding rock?
Yeah,
launch?
like the sounding rockets that like you kind of in a blink of an eye. The Electron.
No, you can see it.
Yeah.
I've seen them from here before. They're beautiful launches. They are smaller than the Antares rocket. If you go to the next slide, we're talking about the rocket
There
sizes.
we go. Okay,
Notable
cool.
rockets that launch from Wallops. So we're not talking about the sounding rockets. We're only going to talk about the Electron, Northrop Grumman's Antares rocket, which is the one that we've seen the most of so far. And then the Neutron rocket, which is the newest one. You can see its diameter is 23 feet, and its height is 141 feet.
That's
so
huge.
The largest rocket to launch from Wallops.
I mean,
this will be huge.
You're over doubling the length of the Electron rocket to the Neutron rocket.
Yep.
Right? And just about. I mean, I'm just looking at the stats here a little bit. So that's almost twice the size.
Similar height.
The diameter is tremendously greater than it.
But it's much wider.
Sure. Yeah.
Yes. So
Yeah.
much
Well, I
more
was kind of
girth.
comparing the two Rocket Lab ones from the Electron and the Neutron.
Yeah, look at the difference.
Yeah.
Now, those pictures aren't to scale. I did it the best I could on
Oh,
this
of
graphic.
course, yeah.
But you can see the raw
but the
numbers
stats,
there.
at least with the numbers there. And you're saying if we've been able to see the Northrop Grumman ones, the Antares rockets a little bit more frequently, like when the Neutron goes off, that's just another one on the list that we'll be able to see at home, that many of us will be able to see at home here.
Yes.
Whether we're looking over the Chesapeake, or you're looking over the James River, then looking over the York River, then looking over the Chesapeake out to the ocean shore, or
from the Outer Banks.
From the Outer Banks.
From New York City.
Yeah, that's right.
Places up there can see it too.
Yeah,
So-
South Shore, Long Island, you can easily
Yes.
see that stuff. Cape May, probably New Jersey,
Yep.
all that kind of stuff. So
The
really
Antares
cool.
launches, those have been for the International Space Station resupply missions.
Yes.
So those traditionally
Yeah.
have gone on a northeast trajectory.
Away from us.
These
Away from us.
Neutron rockets, these are for different customers. So it's not for the ISS specifically. It could be someone launching a constellation of satellites. So wherever
that'll
it launches,
vary. That'll vary.
Yes,
yeah.
that's up to Rocket Lab.
and
I
that,
don't know those
and that
details.
launch direction, if it varies, there could be launches that go southeast, and that's something we'd be
Sure.
able to see just from left to right on our horizon if you're
Yep.
looking east. Like some really cool stuff.
They'll never launch to the west.
No.
They're not going to come over land.
Why is that, Jeff? Yeah.
That's not
So
gonna
if anyone wants to
happen.
know, they're never going to launch west over land, because if anything goes wrong, you don't want a rocket falling out of the sky and landing on North America. If it falls out of the sky and lands in the Atlantic Ocean, it's a little bit easier on us here humans down on Earth.
One final thing with the Neutron
check it
rocket.
out.
So the rocket they announced actually the day I got there to tour the facility. This big announcement came out. Hey, we're gonna land these things.
Bring 'em back.
Yeah, we're gonna land these things on ships out to sea. You can reuse the rocket. It saves a lot of money.
Of course.
That way. So you don't just lose it in the ocean. What happens is, so think of it like this. There's two stages. We have the big main stage that we see in the picture. There's an upper stage that can come out from the fairing. The fairing's going to open up kind of like a hippopotamus opens its mouth.
Okay.
The satellite can
It
come out of
launch
there,
at it, yeah.
and then it can close the fairing. So you don't lose them. The fairing just closes and it comes back down.
And that makes them reusable then, moving forward, correct? The fairings. Everything about
Yes.
it then.
Yep, and then you land it on the ship. You can bring it back to Wallops. You can bring it back to spaceport.
Clean it
refurb
up, yep.
Clean it up and launch it again.
We've seen that time and time with SpaceX with some of their launches, how they come back down.
Right.
So I'll tell you what, I have seen one of them in person. It was, I think, one of the first times that was successful out of Cape Canaveral. It was one of the spookiest things I've ever seen, because
Yes.
you're seeing this massive rocket fall out of the sky.
It's crazy. Yeah.
And then
It's
all of a
wild.
sudden it just positions itself up, and then it comes back down and lands safely. And it was something out of the movies. It's
Yes.
the only way to describe it. It looks like something out of the movies. So really fascinating to see the Rocket Lab getting back on that to help advance just getting to and from space.
They have some
Doing it
exciting things going
efficiently,
on.
they got some really exciting stuff here. So that's,
Yeah.
that's awesome, man. I know you and a couple of our coworkers here are super into this stuff and have been tracking it, or just been really into it. So we're glad that you got to go actually tour the Rocket Lab facility.
Yeah,
And,
I think I'm a
and,
big thank you for that, because that was amazing to be able to see
and
it,
just
share
kind of see
this.
that stuff and get a little behind the scenes and bring it to us here in Hampton Roads, because I know there's a lot of us here that like this stuff. You know what I mean?
This is in our backyard.
Yeah, right
this
in our
isn't
backyard.
like, Kansas, or we're in, Maine or something. We don't see
Or
this.
Houston, Texas,
is
any of
our
that stuff.
zone.
Yeah, this is us here, and it's
Gotta make
awesome.
sure everyone knows what's going on.
Really, really cool stuff here. All right, so in today's episode of Beyond the Forecast, we are going from one of Jeff's favorite things to talk about to maybe another thing, because we're going to talk about your favorite season of winter here. In a little bit, we're going to talk about the past winter we've had. It was one of the snowiest ones we've had in almost 15 years. Long time.
Yep.
But we want to then specify or detail how that maybe correlates to the pollen this season.
Right.
The pollen this spring season, because I know pollen levels have been up a little bit. So
you've been doing some research on that
yeah,
too. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yep. Well, we've been digging some stuff in the Weather Center here. So we're going to reset some graphics. We'll come back and we're going to start talking about seasons and all that. All right, welcome back in. We've gone from one of Jeff's favorite topics to now, I think the next one, which is the winter here.
The pollinating and
the pollinating
winter,
or the winter. Yeah, no, but I say one of Jeff's favorite things. The other, we're going from space travel to, let's talk about this past winter. Not in too much detail, but just the fact that it was an impressive winter. And we got...
It was overdue.
It was overdue. And
Yes.
it seems to be that case here. We have a couple winters where nothing really happens, and then we get one big one. And it offsets the average snowfall amount. And then we get a couple quiet winters, and then we get another good one,
Yeah, but usually the quieter winters, we still get some snow. This was a long stretch of no snow without... I forget if we used the 1 inch or the measurable snow.
Almost was 3 years, right?
It was almost 3 years.
It was almost 3 years.
And
yeah.
this was, I think we were on the top 5 list for the longest streaks. I think we were number 2, actually.
Yeah.
So this was very abnormal. And then to get the snow, it was nice, because I always think about the kids. I grew up in a snowy climate.
Same.
You grew up in a snowy climate.
And I grew up with snow days, and I grew up
Yeah.
looking forward to, we getting snow, we're not getting snow, because then we're going to have a snow day, and we're going to get out and be able to play in the backyard and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And this was an event that gave the kids
A lifelong memory.
A lifelong memory.
Yeah.
Whether they're going sledding or just building a snowman in the backyard with mom and dad, or hanging out with siblings, cousins, like whatever, to be able to enjoy that. So an active kind of winter we did have, still kind of coming off the fringes of it. We have some cold nights in the forecast every now and then, some cooler days. But the question that I wanted to bring up was, does a active, i.e. cold winter or snowy winter, have any play in the pollinating that comes in the spring season there to follow? And our winter was a cold one. It was just outside of the top 10 coldest Januaries by a couple degrees. So it may have been in the top 15 or maybe top 20 of coldest Januaries, that is, at least the month of January. So that's kind of like the heart of our winter. So it's like, okay, so it was a colder one here. And we think of our seasons here, you have your 4 seasons. We've got winter, we've got spring, we've got summer, and we've got autumn. We're transitioning now from winter to spring. But in Hampton Roads, it kind of seems like there's 12 actual seasons. So we're going off of one cold season in winter. And I think right now, Jeff, we're here. The pollinating. Because spring is such a weird...
I like it with
the
text green to match the color of the pine pollen.
Or your sneezes,
Okay.
Yeah, but the pine pollen. No, I get no.
If you're sneezing green stuff, I think you're sick. Doesn't that mean that you're sick?
Probably, yeah, probably.
Anyway,
probably.
We're getting way off
I'm
topic.
just trying to make a transition. Of the cold winter we had to why this may be an active or a bit of a busy spring season here in terms of the pollen levels or so. And what makes pollen go poof? What makes it tough? Or what makes it thick. So warm air right at the end of the winter season, kind of initializing spring, kind of puts the pollen into an early onset. So it can kind of help develop or help the trees bloom a little bit. And I think we're going to focus on trees first, because that's what we experience initially and most. I think most of us are affected by the tree pollen.
And by the oak pollen.
And the oak pollen, too.
Yep.
So that usually kicks off late February, early March. We'll get to that in a second here. But I think the warm air is kind of the one first ingredient that some of the trees need and plants need, more daylight, more warmth, to start their pollinating. Dry conditions make the pollen more dusty. If the house is dry and you got a lot of dust on, haven't dusted in a week, haven't cleaned, haven't pledged the coffee table in a while.
Yeah,
like
the pollen floats
will float. Or those dust particles will float around. So kind of same concept in the atmosphere when the air is dry, the pollen is easily just kind of like floating around in the air.
And it doesn't take long for the air to dry too. So if you think of like, oh, we're going to have rain, that's going to shut down the pollen for 2 days. It doesn't work like that. It shuts it down for 2 hours.
Exactly, and that's the next opposite. Is that moisture will settle the pollen.
Right.
Like we had rain, recently overnight, and that next morning, our back deck covered. You could just see the green of the pollen lining some of the moisture in the puddles because it comes down. You
should do a clear coat stain on your wood deck this time of year when it's green, so then you can get a nice green hue, and then you can lock in the pollen. It's
kind of like a pollen tie dye.
Yeah, it's
in a way, a pollen tie dye in a way. But I think one of the biggest factors that really puts pollen in the air and really affects us humans is the wind. And is the wind blowing the pollen off of the trees or off of the ground, off of the benches, off your car, putting it in the air. And then that's when we get affected. So putting it all together, the warm, dry, windy days are probably the worst for pollen. Dry, windy days, that's what you need for some bad pollen in the air. You know what I mean? To really be affected by it. Let's look at March so far, Jeff. These are the wind gusts that we have had. The peak wind gusts that we have had. Through the month of March so far, there are, I think, 3 days below 20. 3 days where we have had wind gusts below 20 miles an hour.
Yeah.
That's impressive. That's impressive. So that's telling us that there have been dynamic weather systems in the month of March and April that produce windy conditions. Front comes in, breeze picks up out of the south. Before the front comes in, front blows through. The next day, winds out of the northwest, and it's breezy.
That's an interesting stat. And we have to think about, too, the predominant wind direction. You can almost figure it out which days the wind was out of the north compared to out of the south just by looking at the pattern of the wind. You can kind of guess in a way because usually windier days will be from the northwest, a northwesterly flow.
Yes.
But I can't remember which one it was on there, but we had some days where we've had stronger southerly winds.
And I think those are I'm seeing the 34 and the 53.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that might have been a southwest day where we were seeing wind gusts of 35, 34. Maybe the front, and then the front comes through, and then 53. The wind's flipping out of the northwest. You get some peak wind gusts around 50, 53 miles an hour with a thunderstorm. And then the next 3 days, I'm looking at, what's that, 1, 2, 3, 4? I'm looking at 6, 7, 8. The next 3 days, we're seeing wind gusts 31, 26, 25, 23, 19. So backing off, calming down.
High pressure.
That's that high pressure, that dry air moving in. So you can kind of put that. So, but look at that. I mean, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 days, 4 days where wind gusts are over 40 miles an hour.
That's wild.
5 days where they're at 40 and up. So March is a season that I think we get these dynamic weather systems to get at least the one essential ingredient that makes pollen worse for us humans, and that's the wind.
Yeah. I don't mind the windy days here in Hampton Roads and in this part of the world because it's not that windy. Even looking at this chart, those are some strong wind gusts. I lived in Iowa for 4 years for college. There would be days where the sustained wind is always 30 miles an hour.
And that's a lot.
And it's really windy then.
Yeah, and for a longer period of time.
Yeah, for 3 days you get 40 mile an hour winds.
Like this that 50 mile an hour wind gust or that 48 mile an hour wind gust, that's coming at a moment in time.
Yep.
With a thunderstorm, or even for an hour or two when the front's coming in, and then the next 2 to 3 hours things are settling back down a little bit, and you're getting these wind gusts. So more sporadic, more volatile.
I wish we could get some wind like this in July and August when it's stifling.
Yes.
I would take a 10 mile an hour wind.
Yes, when the summer's hot and humid. Yeah. So the pollen that kicks off is the tree pollen first, and that's kind of what kicks off and peaks first. And usually is February or late February, then March, then bleeds into May. We don't really start talking about the grass and the ragweed and the mold until kind of getting into the summer almost, right?
Yeah, so that's more of a summer-type pollen.
So tree is kind of the main one we talk about. The pine pollen you mentioned, that's a big one in the southeast United States. Then also the oak up at this latitude, which is big. But here's the question that I wanted to bring up. And I mentioned
quick because we're low on time.
We're low on time.
Very
here.
low on time.
Oh man. Okay. A colder winter, does that lead to higher concentration in March when the pollen quickly bursts out? Because if we have, let's say, a mild winter through January and February, specifically February, that introduces a slow pollinating of the trees. So it's more gradual. So us humans, we start feeling it earlier, and the pollen season may be longer, but the initial first month may not be as intense because it's a gradual upbringing.
Yes.
Whereas if you have a winter like we have had here, where it was the snowiest since 2010, 2011, and it was relatively on the colder side, that suppresses a lot of the pollen through January and March, or excuse me, February. So then all of a sudden the pollen's like ready to go.
Yep.
And then once we get that first week or two where it's warm, boom.
It begins.
It begins, and
Yep.
it comes in, and it's way more concentrated and way more intense. And I think that's something that's going to happen this season because of the way our winter was. And then
took
now
forever
we're
to get
getting
warm.
into, it took forever to get warm, and now we kind of have this sporadic weather here in March where all of a sudden it's like warm right off the bat, and then boom.
Here we are.
We're getting big pollen here. So that may lead to, I think, a little bit more of a higher concentrated and higher levels of pollen this season.
This episode brought to you by Puffs,
Zyrtec?
Kleenex.
I'm just kidding.
Zyrtec?
Whatever Kleenex you're using here. All right, that's going to do it for us here. We're absolutely running out of time here, but hopefully you enjoyed the latest edition here Beyond the Forecast, Jeff. Thanks so much for showing us the Rocket Lab stuff, man.
Thanks. Yeah, it was
really
fun.
cool stuff. Really, really cool stuff. All right, we'll see you guys next time.